Welcome to Fusion Fiction. Join us as we explore the limitless boundaries of imagination, bringing you captivating stories that unfold with every episode. Let your ears be the canvas where characters come to life, plots twist and turn, and emotions resonate long after the final word. Immerse yourself in the magic of storytelling with Fusion Fiction on Spotify with your host Madhulika Rajahan, where genres blend seamlessly and every episode promises a new discovery. A warm hello to all of you who have tuned in, and a big thanks for giving time to my stories. Most of you have asked me how Rupa's story took form. Well, it's my ode to a little girl who was a mason's daughter and would wave at me each day as I left for office. Her innocent face is forever etched in my memory. So, if you have a Rupa around you, do find time to give her a. So, that's about Rupa. So, without further ado, let's talk about our next episode of Fusion Fiction, the fourth in the series, Kintsugi, the Golden Repair. Have you ever wondered how the past can shape the present? What if the very thing you fear the most holds the key to your healing? In this episode, we will follow Mayra as she confronts the ghosts of her childhood while covering a story at a rehabilitation center. Will she uncover the truth behind the art of Kintsugi and find her own path to redemption? Let's find out how Mayra's painful past intersects with the ancient Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Can the cracks in the broken piece of porcelain reveal hidden beauty, much like our own scars? To find out, tune into Spotify and YouTube on the 22nd of August. Do sign in to listen, and do let me know if you've had a Kintsugi moment yourself. Did you feel more empowered by it? Do write to me. Kintsugi, the Golden Repair. Mayra stumbled as she stepped and reached out at the railing to climb the cemented staircase for her next appointment. Her heart was racing, her palms sweaty and her mouth dry. She did not feel like this for over a decade now. The chipped, dried paint crackled under her polished shoes with each step. The side walls lay neglected, streaked with rainwater, mapping an unseen world, seeping in through the crevices. A long cobweb hung at the far corner, staking its claim unabashedly. The dampness in the walls seeped further, like the graying mold which held her heart, clinging on to her, hiding but never separated. The staircase, with its chipped paint and worn steps, mirrored the fractured state of Mayra's heart, both scarred by time and neglect, but still standing. Forward, upwards, she told herself. It will all be over soon. Somehow it did not feel like it. She had tried hard to distance herself from the story. I think I'll not be able to do justice to it, she had told Mayra, her boss, quite adamantly at first. Try, you might be surprised, Mayra replied, almost coaxing her. Surprised? Mayra had laughed it off. There was no surprise for her, at least to cover this story. She knew all too well how she would feel. The inexplicable dampness of sweat on her palms, the all-consuming hatred she had tried to keep in wraps, showing its ugly face all over again. How do you want me to write it up? Mayra had asked, trying to mask her nervousness. Show their perspective, their pain, their suffering, how they feel being abandoned, facing their fears alone. Sure, Mayra answered blankly. Perspective? How could they have perspective, who had caused so much pain, have any true perspective on their actions? They never ever thought how their actions shape the lives of those around them. They are addicts, selfish and conniving, stripping respect and honors from those who were near them. Shame and more shame. That's what they brought. Now, standing before the gated premises of the rehabilitation center, promising healing through love and counseling, the walled incubator which perhaps kept the ugliness under wraps. How can you pull out what is inside their soul, their very being? They fool you, lie to you, promise you only to get back to it, mocking you, you fools. Myra was 4 when she became prudent enough to know the reason behind her father's glassy eyes, the slow movement of his long curling lashes covering the redness in the veins of his eyes, his staggering gait, the slurred words that escaped his mouth, and the hurried attempt to hide the putrid pungency of stale liquor with a peppermint. She never knew that later in life she would never be able to eat peppermint without being reminded of liquor. My baby. His speech would stagger, delaying the words as she stood, holding on to the lace of the curtain, dreading to go near him. Candy, only for you. He would smile lopsidedly as she recoiled from his offer, her small heart drumming against his tiny ribcage. She knew the routine all too well. She had learnt it by heart. First the candy, then the hug, then the smell. The vile, reeking smell of rotten liquor pouring from his being, which lingered and stuck onto her. The smell she could not rub off herself ever, no matter how many times she rubbed herself. Rub, 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 rub. It stayed stubbornly mocking her littleness, seeping in through the pores of her skin and growing inside her. No matter how much she tried, her tiny inept feet were always unable to carry her far away from the smell. It could come and haunt her even under the bed where she hid, closing her eyes tight, clinging on to her knees for protection, but the smell would always find her. She stayed away when her father stepped in. Like the monster which consumed her father would engulf her too, and she too would become like him, a parasite, sucking out all the happiness her heart knew, only to replace it with a dread and gloom. When sober, he would ask for forgiveness, profusely, to never do it again, his million different ways of saying, "This is the last time," only to come back with a pursed lip and that rancid, sour smell. Landing of the first flight as the terrible feeling held her gut, her heart drumming fast against the ribcage, beckoning to be let loose. She was just not ready for it. She should have been firm with her boss, Mayra thought. She could not do it. She could not face drunkards or addicts. Her fear was palpable, betraying her polished exterior. They could sense her fear, her inability to be normal around them. She took pains to hide the ineptness behind her charming smile, a successful career, a name everyone recognized. She could not hide in front of them. The fear, the rotting moss covering her heart would come out alive and clear. "You are here to find family?" a nurse asked, her headgear crisp white like a crown. "No, I'm here for the interview," she was quick to answer, straightening herself, wiping the tiny pearls of sweat which had gathered on her stiff upper lip. She was too ready to brush off the reference to the word family in the corridor of a place which belonged to addicts. You must confront your fear and make peace with it, her therapist had advised. But how could she reconcile with something that had nearly destroyed her? At 10, she had learned to avoid mentioning her father at school. She had learned to pretend, just like her mother, her partner in crime, that all things were perfect, that if you turn your face away from the ugliness, it would disappear. If you could only pretend to close your eyes tight, you could see it go away. But how could you choose to not breathe? How could you make the smell disappear? The smell which clung on tight. Rub, 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 rub. "You don't talk about your father much," Myra's friend had asked her during lunch break. An innocent question had made Myra's heart churn and drum incessantly. Could she know? Myra's heart pounded as a strange animal grew and walked over her moss-covered heart and choked her throat. Myra looked at her eyes. It was not possible for anyone to know. She had never mentioned it to anyone. He travels a lot. She lied convincingly, just like her father who lied. Her friend seemed convinced of the logic Myra gave, moving on to other important things like the changing color of the butterfly wings and finding animal shapes in the clouds, among others. Later in life, she learned to invent her father. She needed. She would make elaborate Father's Day cards only to keep them hidden in the small rusted metal box under her bed for safekeeping. Myra looked up. There was another flight of stairs to cover. Some more time before she could meet him face to face to know his story, his perspective. The sun slanted through the grills of the ventilator in the high walls, making the tiny particles dance, unaware of being watched. She moved her hand through them, making them move faster, changing their pace and direction. She could hear them whisper, rub, 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 rub. College had been fun, reassuring to the young Mayra, a place where she was no longer just defined as a child who belonged to her parents. She was always wary to let things loose, to let someone too close to see who she was, who she really was, to show the grips of the animal whom she had learned to tame, who had claimed her moss-ridden heart. Her father and she coexisted in parallel worlds, avoiding each other's gaze. He stepped in late from work, crashing after a slow, torturous dinner, struggling to find his mouth with his fingers as food dribbled down the sides of his mouth, ugly, yellow, and frothy. She would help her mother clean the mess on the dinner table, hiding silently the proof of the ugliness which stayed. Rub, 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 rub. She had reached the floor. The third floor, left hand, second door, the doctor had told her. She stood before the white door marked 1001, a palindrome reflecting on her life, looking back at her. Just do your work and move out. No one will know, she thought, as the ugly animal stirred from its slumber, moving its ugly tail over her heart. She stood there rooted in front of the door, as an uneven heaviness bore upon her feet, an invisible chain binding her to the ground. Unable to take another step, she mulled. Perhaps she should run away, she thought. It was too much for her to be there, facing all that she had locked away. She was panting from the effort of climbing and the anxiety of what lay before her. The door creaked open before she could knock. She was met with a room that smelled of disinfectant. The man standing in the doorway, dressed neatly, seemingly composed. You must be her, he spoke gently before she could say a word. They told me about you. Do come in, he invited her rather politely. Mayra blinked as he made way for her to enter the room, moving a little behind like a backward slant. He seemed rather neat for an addict, she thought. No sign of visible trouble. Dressed in white checkered shirt and grey pants, he appeared well rested. The room was rather sparse, just a bed, a table with books, and a collection of broken porcelain pieces meticulously repaired. Myra's eyes fell on the heap of broken porcelain kept carefully, neatly stacked in one corner. There were jumbled pieces of plates and pots which had broken or had got fractured, carrying the story of their accidental injuries. On the side were plates which had somehow been put together carefully. She ran her slender fingers across the beautiful seams of perforated silver, glinting and covering the unfortunate history of the cracks of the ceramic, tracing an uneven path. It was like someone had carefully tried to put the innocence back in the piece, sealing their pain permanently, yet somehow making them more beautiful and worthy. She kept the piece back delicately and moved across to find the books piled up on the table in a calligraphed script she barely recognized. Curiously, she stepped forward to check the titles. The air was surprisingly calm, glacially opposite the storm raging inside Myra's mind and heart. She stood amazed, and somehow the beast crawling at her heart receded with each step she took. The unwavering stillness of rocks in stormy water. "What script is this?" she asked, picking up a book in a script she did not recognize. "Japanese. On the ancient art of Kintsugi." "The Kintsu what?" "The Kintsugi," he enunciated again. "It's an ancient Japanese art of fixing broken pottery with special lacquer. Later it is dusted with powdered metal, usually silver, gold, or platinum," the man explained, picking a piece and stroking its broken contour. "Why would someone take so much pain to repair what is broken and damaged and perhaps should be thrown away?" The man smiled benignly. At the familiarity of the question, he had been questioned upon the fact quite often. There is beauty in being flawed too. That's the philosophy of wabi-sabi, and it helps you get over the regret and pain of wasting. They call it motai nai. "The cracks in the pottery are like our own scars," he explained. "By embracing them and repairing them with gold, we acknowledge their role in our story. It's about seeing the value in what's been through hardship and learning to love it more because of its journey." Mayra nodded, lost in the knowledge of the words she was hearing for the first time, a philosophy she had not tried her hands on. She forced a smile, still fidgety with thoughts that ran through her mind. "Please sit," he offered, a wooden chair which Mayra grabbed halfway. She sat uncomfortably at the edge of the chair, as if being comfortable in the room was not an option she was looking for. "So, who brought you to this place?" the man answered, looking at her eyes unflinchingly. "My family," he answered comfortably. "My family," he answered comfortably, sitting on the bed opposite to Mayra. "They were quite fed up with me and my habit, you see. The urge would always be stronger than the thought to leave it." He narrated his story, his voice devoid of shame or embarrassment from being there. It was as if he was narrating someone else's story. Mayra sat writing the many nuances of his story as he narrated it, stealing quiet glances at the pieces which had been joined together, sometimes interrupting him for details she needed for the story, but mostly listening and making notes. Her eyes lingered on the golden seams as the man spoke. To her, it had seemed futile and rather unnecessary attempt to salvage brokenness. But as Mayra listened to the man's story, she felt her own barriers soften. Was it possible, she thought? Could she gleam too like the pots kept in the corner? Her heart suddenly hoping for redemption she never thought possible. She was not feeling uncomfortable any longer. The animal, which was so ready to choke a few minutes back, lay calm and placid, as if in deep slumber, perhaps unaware of its own existence. She finally asked, "Are you afraid to go back into the real world? Back to the temptation?" He thought for a while and stood up to walk towards the barred window as the sun mellowed its stance, the eucalyptus leaves rustling in the slight wind which stirred them. "I've found solace here," he said, his voice tinged with reflection. "It's a far cry from the chaos I caused my family. I took away a lot from them, their peace, and most importantly, gave them a fear which they never should have had in the first place." As the man spoke, Mayra's eyes were moist. It was as close she had got to hearing the apology she so yearned to hear all her life, albeit coming from a man who was no way related to her, made her look away. She looked at him again, his back turned away from her. He looked almost human to her, not an insensitive object she had rather wished to find. He turned around and Mayra once again concentrated on taking notes. "I've started to volunteer here. I teach them Kintsugi. I feel at ease. I know their pain better. They trust me. I think I found my glory in their trust, a respect I never had all my life, and somehow contributing to make them better makes me feel better too. Maybe this was what I was always supposed to do. I'm not sure, but I guess I found my home. Myra smiled understandably. She had no further questions she wanted to ask. Forgive him, the man said, as Myra kept her notes in her bag and stood up to leave. She looked up as the veneers she had held, hiding herself behind, all along, had chipped. She was not surprised. She let her tears fall. She had been holding the vial far too long. It was pouring out of her being, kept untouched, undercover over the years. How did you know? She asked at last when she reached the doorway. He smiled. I could see fear in your eyes, the same which I have seen in the eyes of those who are close to me. The man picked up a porcelain cup which he had restored and gave it to Myra. An intricate blue and white porcelain cup which had broken in neat halves, the golden line gleaming, holding the broken delineations perfectly along the broken surface. Myra observed the golden seams of the repaired pottery. She saw reflections of her own life, cracked and marred, slowly being pieced together with moments of grace and understanding. The rehabilitation center's dark, damp walls seemed to close in on her, a stark contrast to the luminous golden lines on the repaired porcelain, symbols of hope and renewal that she struggled to grasp. It is for you. Please keep it. Thank you, said Myra, extending her hand to take the piece delicately into her own. She ran a finger through the uneven pathway of golden lines across the seamed surface to resonate with her own journey. She saw in it not just the beauty of repair, but a mirror of her own capacity to find strength and grace in her scars. The steps she had taken not so long ago were no longer tedious. She looked back to see the room one last time as she left, wiping the tears which had voluntarily come out of her eyes. The animal inside her had somehow shrunk. Her heart was no longer moss-ridden.